The night my twin sister showed up at my door, bruised, trembling, and barefoot, I felt something inside me grow colder than winter. Friends, before we start this story, I want to ask you a small favor. If what you hear resonates with your heart, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And in the comments, let me know what city or state you're listening from. It always warms my spirit to see how many of us are out there. Enjoy the story. I remember the exact sound her knuckles made against the wood. 3 soft taps, then silence. Another tap, weaker this time, and then my name, broken, barely there. Maya, please. I opened the door, and for a moment the world went quiet. Even the cicadas in the trees seemed to pause. There she was, my sister. My other half. The girl who used to race me down the old church hill, who laughed louder than anyone in the room, who always smelled faintly of jasmine because she never left the house without that little roller perfume Mama bought her when we were 16. But that night, she didn't smell like jasmine. She smelled like fear. Her lip was cracked. One cheek was swollen. Her hair, usually neat, looked torn through like someone had grabbed it. She held her left arm tight against her body like she didn't want me to see it. I didn't say anything at first. I just stepped aside and let her in. She walked slowly, like every part of her body hurt, and the moment the warm air from my living room hit her, she broke. Not the dramatic kind of crying you see in movies. No, this was quiet, trembling. Wet tears dripping onto my shirt as she collapsed into my arms, shaking so hard I could feel her bones. I held her the way Mama used to hold us when we were small, one hand on the back of her head, the other rubbing slow circles between her shoulders. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe here. I promise you're safe." But inside me, something ugly was waking up, because I knew. Even before she said a word, even before she lifted her shirt and showed me the purple marks on her ribs, I knew who did it. And I knew this night was the beginning of something. Something I couldn't undo once it started. The night my bruised twin sister came to me was the night we decided to switch places and make her husband's life a living hell. Before all of this, before the bruises, before the lies, before the switch that changed everything, our lives were simple. Not perfect, but simple. My name is Maya. Her name is Leah. We were identical twins, the kind that made teachers sigh and friends mix us up at least once a week. Even as adults, strangers would stare at us in the grocery store, whispering to each other as if twins were some kind of miracle they'd never seen before. But our personalities couldn't be more different. I was the steady one, the one who organized, planned, kept lists on the fridge. I liked quiet mornings, warm coffee, and books that smelled like libraries. Leah loved noise, loved movement, loved people. She used to walk into rooms like her joy was something she was passing out free of charge. She laughed with her whole body, hands thrown back, eyes squeezed tight. But marriage dimmed that light in her. Not immediately, not suddenly, just slowly, the way a candle loses itself until only a thin line of smoke remains. I work from home as a freelance interior decorator. Simple jobs mostly, small apartments, cozy kitchens, a few office spaces here and there. I liked my routines. I liked my peace. Leah, before everything, was a preschool teacher. Kids adored her. She always said she felt most alive surrounded by tiny hands and crayon drawings. Our houses stood just 8 minutes apart, but emotionally, our worlds grew farther and farther the moment she married Darren. He was charming when she first brought him around. Too charming, I see now. The type of man who stared at you a little too long, who smiled without showing his teeth, who talked about himself with polished confidence. But back then, I tried not to judge. Sisters don't want to see monsters. We want to believe the best for the people we love. For a while, their marriage looked Normal. Sunday dinners, shared jokes, a small rental house with mismatched furniture and a stubborn old water heater they laughed about. I remember thinking, maybe he's good for her. Maybe he really loves her. I held on to that thought longer than I should have. Because as the months passed, Leah stopped texting in the evenings, stopped coming over just to sit on my couch, stopped answering FaceTime calls because, oh, sorry, babe, Darren wants to watch a movie together. Little things at first, then bigger ones. She canceled brunch 3 times in a row. She wore long sleeves on warm days. She spoke softer, like she was scared her laughter might offend someone. I asked her once, very gently, "Are you okay?" She smiled too quickly. "Of course, I'm just tired." But her eyes looked like they were asking for help without using words. I tried to push the thought away. Told myself I was being dramatic, told myself all marriages go through phases. But deep down, my gut already knew the truth. Still, I didn't imagine the full extent of what he was doing to her. Not until the night she showed up at my door. Not until the bruises spoke for her. Not until she whispered the words that made me drop to my knees beside her. "Maya, he's going to kill me if I go back." She said it like a fact. Not fear, not exaggeration. Just the plain, cold truth. And in that moment, something inside me changed shape. Because where she had been beaten down, I was still standing. And for the first time, I realized maybe I could use that. Maybe we could. That night, as she curled up on my couch, wrapped in one of Mama's old quilts, I looked at her face, my face, and a thought crept into my mind. A dangerous one, a clever one that made my pulse slow and steady the way it does before a storm. What if the man hurting her couldn't tell us apart? And what if that could be used against him? But that's not where the idea started. No, the idea was born in a smaller moment. When she whispered again, "Promise me I'm safe." And I said, "I promise." I didn't sleep that night. Leah drifted in and out on the couch, curling into herself whenever her body shifted wrong. Every so often, she winced a tiny sound, the kind a person makes only when they're trying not to wake anyone. The kind of sound a woman makes when pain has become her secret roommate. I pulled a blanket around my shoulders and sat on the armchair facing her. The room smelled faintly of ginger tea and eucalyptus, the candle I'd lit earlier to calm us both down. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, the old oak branches tapping lightly like impatient fingers. I watched her chest rise and fall, slow and uneven. Saw the way her bruised lip twitched, saw the remnants of the girl she used to be. And every time I thought about Darren, about his voice, his hands, his weight, I felt this coldness move through me like winter water. When dawn finally came, soft and pink, Leah stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, as if waking hurt too. "Maya?" Her voice was grainy, small. "I'm here," I whispered. She nodded, then tried to sit up, only to flinch sharply and press her arm against her ribs. I stood quickly. "Don't move too fast. I'll make breakfast." She tried to smile. "Your pancakes?" I managed a small one back. "You think I'd give you anything less after the night you've had?" But inside me, something cracked. A raw, protective love, the kind that comes from losing so much already, our parents, our childhood home, the sense that the world was fair. I moved to the kitchen, letting the familiar motions ground me. The soft hiss of batter hitting the pan, the warm smell of vanilla drifting upward, the quiet crackle of butter. These were small, normal things that made me feel steady, things Leah had lost in her marriage. While I cooked, she spoke from the couch, her voice barely carrying. "I should have left sooner." A pause. He wasn't always like this. I didn't turn around yet. Some truths are easier to hear when your hands are busy. When did it start? I asked softly. She hesitated. Maybe 8 months after the wedding? That timing didn't surprise me. The mask always slips once the ring is secure. She continued, voice trembling. It was small at first. He'd get irritated if I was late coming home, or if dinner wasn't hot enough, or if I forgot to do laundry. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, flipped a pancake. And then, I asked quietly. And then, she said, it stopped being irritation. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept talking like she needed to empty all the poison inside her. She shoved me once. Just once. He apologized so much afterwards, cried even. He said he was stressed from work, said it would never happen again. And you believed him, I whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I brought over the plate of pancakes, setting them gently on the coffee table. She looked at them like they were something fragile, something from a world she no longer belonged to. We ate in silence. Halfway through, she whispered, I didn't want you to hate me. I set my fork down. Hate you? Leah, you came here. You asked for help. That's the bravest thing you've done in years. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I was scared you'd say it was my fault, she murmured. I reached out, took her hand. Whatever he told you, whatever he made you believe, it wasn't your fault. None of it. She nodded slowly, but the truth hadn't reached her yet. Trauma makes a home out of lies before it lets truth in. Later that morning, after she had eaten and taken a warm shower, Leah sat beside me at the small dining table. She wrapped her hands around a mug of tea, like she needed the heat to keep her upright. Can I tell you something? She asked. Of course. She stared into her mug. When we first got married, I really thought I'd found someone who loved me more than anything. I stayed quiet, letting her speak. He used to wake me up with coffee, used to fix my hair when we were going out. He'd make silly jokes about how I'd be the one paying the bills if his company ever went under. She gave a weak laugh. It all felt so normal. I thought I finally had the life Mama wished for us. I remember those first months too. The way she glowed when she talked about him, the way she defended him even before I ever questioned anything. He changed so slowly, she whispered. A few months after the wedding, he'd get angry over small things. Dirty dishes, a misplaced receipt, me being too friendly with male coworkers. That one caught my attention. Possessiveness is never small. She continued, then he wanted to know my schedule, wanted me home right after work. If I wasn't, he'd call 10 times, sometimes show up at my school. Did you tell anyone? I asked. She shook her head. Who would I tell? I didn't want people thinking I'd made a mistake marrying him. The shame, always the shame, keeps women silent. Did he ever... She cut me off with a nod. A small one. So small it could have been mistaken for breathing. The rage that moved through me was steady, measured. Not the fiery kind, the cold kind. The kind that plots. I didn't say what I was thinking. Not yet. Instead, I reached across the table and held her hand. You're not going back, I said simply. She swallowed. He's going to come looking for me, Maya. He always does. He's going to show up at my job, at yours, at the house. He won't find you. She looked up, searching my face. What do you mean? I didn't answer right away because even though the idea had been whispering at the back of my mind all night, I hadn't said it out loud yet, not even to myself. But when I saw her eyes, my eyes, filled with that hopeless, trembling fear, The words formed on their own. Quiet. Firm. I mean, he won't find you if he thinks you're still with him. She froze, and I watched her understand. Watched the terror shift, slowly, into something else. Something sharp. Something brave. "Maya," she whispered, "you're not—" "I am," I said softly. "For you. For us." We sat there in silence for a long moment. Two identical faces, one bruised, one burning. And the idea, the dangerous, brilliant, necessary idea, took its first real breath between us. We could switch places. I could pretend to be her. She could hide. And Darren would learn what it felt like to fear something he couldn't control. At that moment, Leah whispered, "You do that for me?" And I answered with the truth that had been growing in me since she knocked on my door. "I'll do whatever it takes to get you free."
Leah didn't answer me right away. She just stared, studying my face, my voice, the steadiness in my words. And I could almost feel her mind running through every memory we shared, every time I shielded her when we were kids, every time she came to me first when something was wrong, every time she broke and I held the pieces. Finally, she whispered, "Maya, you can't." Her voice didn't sound like she believed her own words. It sounded more like she wished she did. "Why not?" I asked gently. "Because Darren is—" She closed her eyes. "He's unpredictable. You don't know what he'll do. You don't know how he changes. I barely know myself anymore." She took a shuddering breath. "He doesn't hit me every day. Sometimes he's normal. Sometimes he's sweeter than you can imagine. He'll look at me like I'm the only thing in the world he cares about." Her voice cracked. "And then something small happens. A tone, a look, a wrong word, and he becomes someone else entirely." I let that settle between us. "You shouldn't have to live like that," I said. "But you could get hurt." "I've lived long enough to know one thing," I replied softly. "A man like Darren doesn't hurt out of strength. He hurts out of fear." She gave a humorless laugh. "Fear of what?" "Losing control." Her fingers tightened around the warm mug, knuckles turning pale. "He can hurt me," she whispered, "but he can't hurt you and think it was me. He's not careful enough for that." There it was, the truth beneath her words. She wasn't afraid for me. She was afraid of what would happen if he believed he could bruise my body the way he bruised hers. But she didn't understand something. Not yet. I wasn't planning to let him get close. Not in the way he got close to her. Not in the way he used to whisper apologies into her hair while wiping the tears he caused. No. This plan, our plan, would look different. "I'll go to your house," I said calmly. "You will stay here. No one knows you came last night except me." She nodded slowly. "You'll need to rest. Your body needs time. Your mind needs time. Meanwhile, I'll take your place for a few days. Just long enough for Darren to understand something." "What?" I said. "That you can't hurt you anymore. That you're not afraid. That you have someone he cannot intimidate." Her eyes widened. "Maya, what if he—" "I will not let him touch me," I repeated firmly. "The moment he tries, I walk. And he won't want me to walk. Cowards never want their power threatened by witnesses." She flinched slightly, like the word power meant something darker to her than I fully understood. "What will you do?" she whispered. I looked at her, my twin, my mirror. "Whatever he's been doing to you, calling, controlling, insulting, I'm not letting any of it slide. I'll challenge everything. I'll question everything. I'll hold him accountable in ways you couldn't. And then, I said softly, he'll start to unravel. Leah wrapped herself around herself, shivering though the room wasn't cold. Maya, he'll know. Know what? Leah said quietly. That I told you. Men like him, they know when you break their rules. They know when you've talked. I reached out, steadying her hand. Then let him think you finally got strong. Let him fear the version of you he never expected. She swallowed hard. Her voice was quiet when she said, I don't want him to hurt you. And he won't, I answered. You forget. I haven't lived with him. I don't love him. I don't fear him. I won't flinch or shrink or apologize when he raises his voice. Her eyes filled again. I wish I could be like you. I shook my head gently. No, Leah, you shouldn't have to be tough just to survive someone who claimed to love you. Silence settled again, heavy but honest. Then she whispered a single word. Okay. It was barely audible, but it was agreement, consent, the beginning. I nodded slowly. We'll take it step by step. A long exhale left her body like she'd been holding her breath for years. What do you need from me? She asked. For now, I said softly, rest and tell me everything. Her eyes flickered with a kind of tired fear. Everything? Yes, I need to know how he talks, what he expects, what he notices, what triggers him. She closed her eyes, nodding. That'll take a while, she whispered, but we have time. But even as I said it, a sharp knock knocked on my door. 3 heavy pounds. Not questioning, not gentle, the kind of knock that announces itself. Leah froze. Her lips parted. Her voice came out small. Maya, that's him. My pulse didn't race. My breath didn't shatter. I simply stood, calm settling over me like a familiar coat. It was earlier than expected. But maybe that was better. I looked down at Leah, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Stay quiet, I whispered. She nodded, trembling. I walked toward the door, my reflection in the hallway mirror catching my eye. Yes, I looked enough like her. And today, that was exactly what I needed. I reached for the doorknob, turned it, and opened the door to meet the man who broke my sister.
When the door swung open, the first thing I noticed was Darren's breath. Sharp, fast, hot with anger. The second thing I noticed was his eyes. Dark, narrowed, scanning my face like he was trying to read a language he thought he already knew. Maya. He said my name like an accusation. I leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, pretending to be tired, weak, unsteady, the way Leah would have looked after a night like the one she survived. Darren, I breathed out, letting my voice tremble just slightly, just enough. He stepped forward like he intended to push past me. I didn't move. And something in his eyes flickered a brief, confused hesitation. Where is she? He demanded, though he was staring right at me. I lowered my gaze, letting him make his own assumptions. He thought I was Leah. Good. Where were you? He pushed, his voice tight. I went to the house, you weren't there. His tone had the cadence of ownership, not worry. I needed some air, I murmured. Air? He scoffed. At 2 a.m? And your car gone all night? You think I'm stupid, Leah? Leah. Hearing her name spoken with that tone, sharp, belittling, laced with suspicion, made something behind my ribs tighten painfully. No, I said softly. I just needed space. He stepped closer, too close. His cologne, strong, metallic, synthetic, hit me like a wall. You don't get space, he said under his breath, not when you decide to disappear without telling me. Inside, a chill spread through me. Outside, I kept my face still. I'm here now, I said. That's what matters.
He scoffed again, looking down at my clothes, my soft sweater, leggings, socks. "You went to your sister," he said flatly. "Didn't you?" I lifted my eyes slowly, letting fear and exhaustion blur together on my face. He smiled, not a warm smile, a knowing, satisfied smile. "Of course you did, because you can't handle things on your own." I felt my jaw tighten, a small thing, barely noticeable, but he noticed. His eyes sharpened. "What's that look?" he snapped. Control. Everything came down to control. "Nothing. I'm just tired." "You're tired?" He laughed, a dry, mocking sound. "You think you're tired? I worked 12 hours yesterday. 12. And you couldn't even be home when I needed you?" I let my shoulders curl inward a bit, just enough to look smaller. "I'm sorry." He leaned in, lowering his voice to a whisper that scraped against my ear. "Say it like you mean it." My pulse didn't change. My breathing didn't shake. But I dropped my gaze and whispered, "I'm sorry." He straightened, satisfied. Then his eyes drifted past me toward the living room. My heart kicked once. Only once. "Who else is here?" he asked suddenly. "Someone's here." "No one," I answered quickly. His jaw twitched. "Move." He tried to step past me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment he'd test his boundaries. I didn't move, not an inch. His eyes snapped back to mine, confusion flickering. "I said move," he repeated slower this time. I kept my voice soft, calm, almost apologetic. "No. No one is here, and you're not coming inside." A slow flush crept up his neck. "Maya," he said, trying to keep his voice low, "don't play games with me. Let me in." I shook my head once. He stared at me so long the seconds felt like they stretched thin. Then his voice dropped into a quieter, more dangerous register. "Why are you acting like this? What did she tell you?" "She?" I asked softly. "Your sister," he hissed. I exhaled, letting a tremor run through my shoulders, one part performance, one part real anger held too tight. "I just needed a break," I murmured. "A break from what? Me?" He stepped closer again. Too close. I held my breath just for 1 second, imagining Leah in my place, imagining the way she must have flinched, the way she must have learned to hold herself smaller, tighter, quieter. But I wasn't Leah, and he wasn't prepared for that. When he reached out, maybe to grab my arm, maybe to move me aside, I lifted my chin slightly and spoke in a low, firm voice, "Don't touch me." His hand froze mid-air. He stared at me like he didn't recognize who he was looking at. "Leah," he said slowly, "what's wrong with you?" Nothing was wrong with me. For the first time, something was finally right. I said no, I repeated softly. "I'm not doing this today." He lowered his hand, confusion knitting his brow. Anger simmered beneath it, building, gathering heat. But something else flickered there too, uncertainty. He wasn't used to this version of her. He wasn't used to pushback. He wasn't used to no. "Fine," he muttered finally. "If you want to act like a child, go ahead. I'm going home. You will too. By tonight." His voice hardened. "And if you're not..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He turned and walked down the steps, his boots thudding against the wood. He didn't look back. When his car finally pulled away, I closed the door slowly, turning the lock with a quiet click. Behind me, I heard a soft, shaky exhale. Leah stepped out from the hallway where she'd been hiding, hands covering her mouth, tears in her eyes. "Maya," she whispered, voice trembling, I would have apologized and let him in. I would have..." "I know," I said gently. I walked towards her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "But that's why I'm here." She broke then, full sobs, shaking so hard I had to hold her upright. I wrapped my arms around her, steadying her. "He didn't touch me," she cried. "He always touches me. Even when he's not hitting, he grabs, he pulls, he pushes. And you made him stop with one word." I stroked her back slowly.
He needs to learn, I whispered, and I'm going to teach him. She looked up at me through swollen eyes. What are we going to do now? I took a slow breath, the weight of the decision settling into place like a puzzle piece finding its home. We're going to switch, I said. Tomorrow. Leah's lips parted, fear tangled with hope. And then, she whispered, and then, I said with a calm I didn't fully feel yet, we're going to make him unravel.
By the end of the week, I could tell Michael was starting to break. It wasn't the little inconveniences that got to him, like his mysteriously disappearing keys, the accidental cold showers, or the way the thermostat kept resetting itself in the middle of the night. Those were just warm-ups. It was the way I looked at him. Not with fear, the way my sister had, not with love, the way he thought he deserved, but with knowledge. He hated that. On Friday morning, he stood in the kitchen, staring at me as I buttered toast. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight, like he was trying to swallow a truth that wouldn't go down. "You're different," he finally said. I didn't look up. "Am I?" "You know you are," he snapped. "You think I'm stupid?" I placed the knife down slowly and met his eyes. "I've never once thought you were stupid." He flinched because he heard the real sentence buried beneath mine. "But I know you think I am." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You're not acting like yourself. You don't react the way you used to." "You mean I don't flinch when you raise your voice?" I asked calmly. The color drained from his face. Now he was scared. Good. He cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Are you talking to someone?" I smiled, small and knowing. "Why? Are you worried I'm telling people things?" He froze. Because he was worried. Because secrets are only powerful when the victims stay quiet. And for the first time, he was realizing he wasn't sure who he was dealing with. I stepped close enough that he had to lean back slightly. I said, "You should get ready for work." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Right." He grabbed his briefcase, but his hand was shaking. When the door finally shut behind him, my sister emerged from the guest room, her hair tied back, a mug of tea in hand. The bruises on her cheek had started to yellow. "You think he suspects?" she asked. I said, "He suspects everything, but he doesn't know what." She nodded, taking a shaky breath. She said, "I never thought I'd see him like that." I said, "Terrified?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I touched her arm gently. I said, "This is just the beginning." Her eyes hardened, not with anger, but with the slow awakening of someone reclaiming her own power. She finally asked, "What's next?" I smiled. I said, "Tonight, we let him talk himself into a panic. And tomorrow," I picked up my phone, scrolling to the number I had saved under M, the private investigator who owed me a favor. I said, "We start pulling the threads on his secrets." My sister blinked. She said, "You think he has any?" I looked at the door, imagining Michael's trembling hands, his darting eyes, the way he kept checking his phone when he thought I wasn't watching. I said, "Oh, I think he has plenty," and we were going to unravel every last one. That night, I stayed in my sister's house, letting her sleep for the first time in weeks without fear. The soft ticking of the clock filled the quiet spaces between our whispered planning. I could hear her even breathing, slow and steady, as though the world had finally softened its edges for her. Meanwhile, I sat at the kitchen table, a notepad in front of me, and scribbled down everything she had told me about Darren. His moods, the times he flew into fits, the little habits he didn't notice in himself. Every pattern,
every insecurity, every overinflated ego. I had to know what buttons to push, because this wasn't about vengeance in the way movies show it. It was about justice, about reclaiming my sister's life from a man who had slowly poisoned it. And the first step was proving to him that she wasn't the only one he could intimidate. The next morning, I dressed as Leah would: soft blouse, fitted jeans, a light layer of makeup, hair tied neatly. I practiced her smile in the mirror, the one Darren always melted for, the one that had fooled him for years. Only now, the smile hid a simmering steel beneath it. When Darren arrived, he didn't notice the difference at first. He expected fear. He expected flinching. He got neither. "Morning," I said cheerfully, my voice soft, almost sing-song like Leah's. His eyes flicked up to mine. His lips curved slightly, the beginning of a condescending smile, but it faltered. "You look different," he muttered, frowning. "Something's off." I smiled innocently, letting the words hang like smoke in the air. "Really, I feel the same." His jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Then, as if testing a theory, he stepped closer. "I can tell when you're lying, Leah. Don't try to—" I interrupted him, stepping back casually, tilting my head with perfect nonchalance. "Lying about what?" I asked softly, letting my eyes stay wide and calm. The change in his stance was subtle, but I noticed it. Every time he raised his voice or tried to dominate, I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. He realized quickly, this wasn't the sister he had been controlling. He started leaving the house in little bursts, snapping at me for minor things, then checking his phone compulsively, almost afraid I would catch him. And I did, every time. I began noting the times he was honest, when he revealed frustration, irritation, or secret habits. By day 3, the cracks were forming. He had an important presentation at work, he claimed, but instead of being focused, he spent the morning pacing the house, muttering to himself about whether I was lying to him, whether someone else knew things he didn't know. "Leah, are you even listening?" he barked at one point. I tilted my head, smiling gently. "I'm listening, but maybe you're talking to yourself too much." The words hit him like cold water. He froze, blinked, and muttered something under his breath. Then, abruptly, he left, forgetting his phone on the counter. I picked it up later and smiled to myself. Every single message revealed him. Lies to his coworkers, complaints about Leah that painted him as controlling and paranoid, texts to a woman he thought he could hide. I tucked the phone into my bag. Evidence, the kind that could finally hold him accountable. That evening, I walked past the neighborhood store and ran into his coworker, Mark. "Oh, hey, Leah," he said casually. "Wait, something's off. You look different. New haircut?" "Yeah," I said innocently. "I felt like a change." Mark's eyes flickered, unconsciously gauging me, trying to match me with the person Darren described. And that was the moment I realized Darren had built a whole world where he alone controlled the narrative. I was about to show everyone else what he looked like when the mask slipped. That night, I sat with Leah over tea. She was pale, but alert. "Did you see him today?" she asked, voice trembling. I did, and he's starting to unravel. Her hands shook slightly. Are you safe?" I reached across and held hers. "I've never been safer, because this isn't about me. This is about you, about taking your life back." She nodded slowly, a flicker of hope returning to her eyes. "And tomorrow," I added, my tone quiet but firm, "we take it further. He won't know what hit him." I could see the mixture of fear and anticipation in her gaze. That's when I realized something important.
She wasn't just watching me fight for her freedom, she was learning. She was remembering that she could be brave too. And for the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of the sister I remembered, the one who smiled freely, laughed freely, and didn't flinch at the world. Tomorrow, Darren would get a taste of the storm he had created, and we would make him realize, in every bone of his body, that control was an illusion he no longer possessed.
The next morning, Darren arrived earlier than usual. I was already at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, pretending to scroll on my phone like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The first thing I noticed was the tension in his shoulders, the way he glanced around the room like he expected a trap. And in a way, he wasn't wrong. "Morning," I said, looking up casually, letting my eyes linger on his face. He flinched slightly, like the sound of my voice carried a weight he didn't expect. "Leah," he muttered, dragging the name out. "We need to—" I cut him off, leaning back in my chair, a calm smile on my face. "Darren," I said softly, "before you say anything, I just want to remind you, I'm here now, and things are going to be different." He froze, the air thick between us. His knuckles whitened on the edge of the counter. "You don't know what you mean," he said carefully, voice low, almost threatening. "Oh, I think you do," I said, tilting my head like a teacher addressing a student who thought they were clever. "You've been living under the assumption that Leah will always shrink, always apologize, always flinch. But that's not me." He blinked rapidly, uncertainty creeping into his eyes. The man who had once dominated the room with anger, who had made my sister afraid of every sound, every glance, suddenly looked small. "You're different," he finally said. "Yes, I'm different, and you should get used to it." That afternoon, Darren's phone rang. I watched him, pretending to ignore it, sipping my tea slowly. He cursed under his breath and answered, pacing nervously. I couldn't hear the conversation, but the gestures, clenched fists, rapid pacing, muttered words were all there. Every time he glanced my way, his eyes darted nervously, like he feared I could read his mind. And maybe I could. Because I had been inside this house for days now, walking in Leah's shoes. I knew his rhythms, his triggers, the way he tried to control space and time. By the evening, he was snapping at everything. The way I folded the napkins, the way I placed the dishes in the dishwasher, even the way I sipped my water. Each time, I held my ground. I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I just smiled, just like Leah would, but with the subtle confidence of someone who finally had control, and he hated it. The first real test came when he tried to corner me in the living room. "You think you can just stand there and talk to me like that?" he demanded. I didn't move. My arms were folded lightly across my chest. "You don't get to control me anymore," I said softly. Something snapped in his eyes. He lunged, not with a punch, but with aggression, meant to intimidate, meant to force compliance. I stood my ground. He froze mid-step, realization dawning. The control he once wielded so effortlessly didn't work here. "You're not Leah," he hissed. "I am," I said gently, "but I'm also not afraid. And that's the problem for you, isn't it?" His face twisted. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. Of me, of the new rules in this house, of the truth that I represented. A mirror reflecting all the ways he had been cruel. By the end of the week, Darren was unraveling visibly. He triple-checked locks, hovered over his phone nervously, avoided eye contact, and snapped at strangers in public just to vent. Meanwhile, my sister watched from the sidelines. Her bruises were fading, but her eyes were alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. "She's scary," she whispered one night, half awed, half relieved. I smiled at her. No, Leah, that's the thing. She's not scary. That's me. And you can be that too. Her fingers twined nervously in mine. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can, I said softly. All you need is the first step. And he just learned that we won't flinch. That's the first step. That night, as Darren muttered to himself in his office, pacing the floor, I realized something. The house had shifted. The energy had changed. The fear that had dominated Leah's life for years was gone. And Darren was learning that power could be challenged. This was only the beginning. And tomorrow, we would push further. By the next morning, Darren was visibly on edge. He had been pacing the house all night, or at least that's what my sister said when she woke, bleary-eyed, clutching a mug of cold coffee. The bruises on her arm were fading, but the fear in her eyes had already begun to lift. She looked at me as if to ask silently, "Are you sure we can do this?" I gave her a small, reassuring nod. Yes, we could, and we would. The day began quietly. Too quietly. I stayed in character as Leah, but every gesture, every glance was calculated. I smiled at him warmly when he entered the kitchen, even offering to make his coffee. But instead of putting sugar in his cup, I replaced it with decaf. He didn't notice at first, but by mid-morning, the frustration started to creep into his movements. A jitter here, a tap of the fingers there. Every small disruption, carefully orchestrated, fed the panic building inside him. I could see it in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his usually rigid jaw, the way his shoulders tensed, the small, involuntary clenching of his fists. He was unraveling, and I hadn't even touched the major levers yet. Lunch was the real test. I invited one of his coworkers over, under the pretense that Leah had made a new casserole recipe to share. The coworker, Mark, who had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Darren's sudden paranoia, walked in, smiling, oblivious to the storm brewing behind the kitchen walls. "Hey, Darren," Mark said casually, glancing at him. "You okay? You look tense." Darren's response was defensive, tight-lipped, almost aggressive. "I'm fine," he snapped, glancing at me as if to warn me to say nothing. I smiled brightly. "Would you like some casserole, Mark? I just made it." Mark nodded, and as he and Darren awkwardly sat down, I watched the subtle exchange of glances. Darren's hand trembled slightly as he cut into his plate. He didn't realize that every little gesture, every slip of composure was being noticed and cataloged for later use. By the afternoon, Darren's paranoia had escalated. He kept checking his phone obsessively, pacing between the living room and the kitchen, muttering under his breath. And every time I caught his eye, I smiled, calm, unafraid, almost maternal. "You look tired," I said softly, setting a glass of water on the counter. "I'm fine," he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't sound fine," I said gently. "You're worried, you're tense, and you know it." The color drained from his face. For the first time, he understood that I could see through him. That evening, my sister joined me in the kitchen. She had grown quieter, but there was a spark in her eyes, a spark of empowerment that hadn't been there for months. "He's losing it," she whispered, barely able to contain her amazement. "I know," I said, "and it's only going to get worse." Her hand shook slightly as she poured tea. "Do you think he'll fight back?" I leaned close, voice low and steady. "He already is, but not in the way he thinks. He's fighting against something he doesn't understand, and that's terrifying for him." We shared a quiet laugh, a small victory in the shadows. By nightfall, Darren had retreated to his office, pacing and muttering, phone in hand, his mind racing. He didn't realize that we had begun documenting everything,
His calls, his messages, the patterns of his paranoia. Every slip, every lie, every instance of cruelty was being quietly collected. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about justice, and more importantly, about reclaiming my sister's life. And as I watched him from the hallway, I realized something chillingly satisfying. He had no idea how much power we really had. Tomorrow we would tighten the noose further, and Darren would learn, in every sense, that control was an illusion and that we had the upper hand.
By Saturday morning, Darren's nerves were stretched thin. He had spent the night pacing the living room, phone clutched tightly in his hand, muttering under his breath. My sister told me later she had barely slept, listening to the echoes of his anger and frustration seep through the walls. I, on the other hand, was calm, methodical, waiting for him to reach the point where his control completely slipped, where he would make mistakes he couldn't recover from. The first test came when I suggested we take a walk to the nearby park. "Leah, it's freezing," he protested, fumbling with his coat. "Just a short walk," I said, smiling innocently. "Fresh air will do us good." He grumbled, but he followed. The moment we stepped outside, I could see the tension in him unraveling further. Every pedestrian glance, every car passing by seemed to magnify his anxiety. I walked beside him with deliberate calm, let him stew in discomfort. And it worked. By the time we returned, Darren was agitated. "You're acting differently," he snapped as soon as we stepped inside. "Everything's off. What are you doing?" I tilted my head, maintaining the same soft smile I had perfected. "Just living," I said lightly, "being myself." He stared, jaw tightening. He tried to maintain dominance, but the more he tried, the smaller he seemed. He had expected fear, submission, apologies. He got none. And the panic had begun to show. That evening, I took a bold step. I suggested we make dinner together, just like Leah would. Only I made sure every minor detail would frustrate him. The oven didn't preheat fast enough. The knives weren't in the right order. I accidentally spilled a little flour on the counter. Darren's face twisted with irritation. He snapped, flustered, shouting at me to fix everything. I held my ground. I smiled. I remained calm. "You're so angry," I said softly, tilting my head. "Why? It's just dinner." He froze, as if I had struck him. Then he muttered something under his breath and stormed out of the kitchen. When he returned, I had prepared a perfect meal. The tension was thick. Darren's eyes flickered everywhere, checking, measuring, doubting. And I sat calmly, sipping my tea, the picture of serene innocence. Mark called again, Darren's coworker, asking if he could stop by. I nodded, inviting him in. Darren's hands were shaking as he greeted Mark. I noticed every detail. The way his eyes darted around the room, the slight tremor in his fingers, the awkward coughs as he tried to maintain control. By the time Mark left, Darren's composure had cracked entirely. Later, when my sister came to join me in the living room, she whispered, almost in awe, "He's losing it. He's completely unraveling." I nodded. "Good. Let him. This is the first time he's had to face someone who won't back down." Her eyes were wide, a mix of relief and disbelief. "I can't believe you did all this, and he doesn't even know it's you."
Exactly, I said. And the longer he stays in his own head, the more he loses control. By tomorrow, he won't know which way is up. We shared a quiet smile, understanding that this was more than revenge. This was justice. And for the first time in months, my sister smiled without fear. By midnight, Darren had retreated to his office, muttering threats under his breath, checking his phone obsessively, and pacing as if trying to run away from the truth that had finally caught up with him. And we were just getting started.
By Sunday morning, Darren was a different man. His usual confidence, the rigid control he wielded over every corner of the house, was gone. It was replaced by a jittery caution, a subtle paranoia that clung to him like a shadow. Every glance at me, or what he still believed was Leah, was measured, almost fearful. I watched him carefully as he brewed his coffee, humming under his breath, hands shaking slightly. Every small slip, every tiny moment of frustration was another thread we could follow. That afternoon, I decided it was time to push a little further. "Darren," I said casually as he passed the kitchen, "do you mind if I check your emails for the printer password? I can't seem to get it to work." He froze mid-step, one hand on the counter. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. He asked, voice tight, "Why do you need it?" I said softly, tilting my head, "Because I'm trying to help. I'd hate for the printer to jam during your important work call." He hesitated, then muttered, "Fine, but be careful." I smiled innocently as I opened his laptop, pretending to fumble with the password. But inside, I was calm. I had noticed the pattern of his work emails, the threads he kept hidden, the ones he thought no one would ever read. And now, for the first time, someone was reading. I stumbled upon the first big revelation: messages between Darren and a woman he had been secretly meeting outside of town. It wasn't just flirtation. It was planning, scheming, a web of lies that had contributed to the fear and isolation my sister had lived under. I felt my chest tighten, not with anger exactly, but with the cold clarity of truth. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the leverage we needed. Later that evening, I shared a quiet glance with my sister. I whispered, nodding toward my phone, hidden in my pocket. She swallowed hard, eyes wide. I can't believe he's been doing this all along." "I know," I said softly. "And now we can show him what happens when the tables turn." When Darren returned home that night, he was tense, defensive, pacing the hallway as if anticipating an ambush. "Leah," he said carefully, voice low, almost pleading, "we need to talk." I tilted my head, calm, serene. "Of course," I said softly. "What about?" He hesitated, looking around nervously, then muttered, "Everything. Just everything." I smiled gently, letting the words hang in the air. "Good," I said. "We will talk. But first, I think you need to understand something." I let it beat pass, letting him squirm under the weight of my gaze. I said slowly, choosing each word, "You've been hiding a lot, and the things you thought would stay secret aren't." His face paled. The muscle in his jaw twitched. For the first time, I saw real fear, not just anger or frustration. "What do you mean?" he whispered, voice cracking. I let my hand brush against the countertop, leaning slightly forward. "I mean everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every little cruelty, you've left traces.
And now we know. He staggered back, nearly dropping his briefcase. What do you know? I smiled faintly, calm and assured. More than you ever wanted me to. And for the first time in months, Darren realized he wasn't in control anymore.
Darren couldn't hide it anymore. By Monday morning, he was jittery, pacing the house like a caged animal, muttering under his breath and constantly checking his phone. Every small sound, a car outside, a door closing, a neighbor's laugh, made him flinch. He hadn't realized the depth of the storm coming for him, and that was exactly the point. I decided it was time to confront him, not with anger, but with evidence. "Darren," I said calmly as he stormed into the kitchen, coffee in hand, "we need to talk." He froze, one hand on the counter. "Talk about what?" I held up my phone casually. "You know, about all the little secrets you've been keeping." His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." I smiled gently. "You really think I don't?" The words hit him like ice. He stared, blinking rapidly. His voice faltered. I don't... I didn't let him finish. "All of it, Darren. The texts, the messages, the lies, the things you've done to Leah." His hands shook slightly. I can explain." "Explain?" I echoed softly. "Do you really think there's an explanation for cheating? For lying? For controlling someone's life with fear?" He swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the floor. For the first time, I saw shame. Not anger, not defiance, but real, gut-wrenching shame. I let the silence stretch. It was important. He needed to feel the weight of every secret he had buried, every cruel action he had hidden. Finally, he spoke, voice low and trembling. I didn't mean... It just... I held up my hand, cutting him off. "I don't want excuses. I want accountability." He flinched at the word, like it was a weapon. And it was. That evening, I showed my sister everything. The messages, the patterns, the proof of betrayal. Her eyes welled up, but this time it wasn't just fear. "This is incredible," she whispered. I can't believe it." "You can believe it now," I said softly. "And soon, everyone else will too." Her hands trembled as she held mine. Do we show him to the world?" I nodded. "We don't need to shout. We just need to be steady, to make sure the truth is undeniable." And for the first time in months, my sister smiled without fear. The next day, Darren was completely on edge. Every step he took was cautious, measured, defensive. He kept glancing at me, trying to read my expression, trying to regain some control he no longer possessed. You're not Leah," he said finally, voice cracking. I can feel it. You've changed everything." I leaned in slightly, my voice calm and unwavering. "I am Leah, Darren, but I'm not afraid anymore. And you need to understand that your actions have consequences." He staggered back, chest tight, breathing shallow. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about manipulating or controlling. He was thinking about how much power he had lost. And in that moment, I realized the final stage was near, exposing everything in a way that would leave no room for lies. That night, as Darren muttered to himself in his office, my sister whispered, "Are we really ready for what comes next?" I took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Yes, we've already done the hard part. He's already unraveling. Now, we just finished the story." For the first time, I saw hope in her eyes, mixed with a quiet, newfound strength. And I knew, tomorrow, Darren would face a reckoning he could never forget.
By Tuesday morning, Darren was a shadow of the man he had been. He moved through the house with forced calm, voice low and clipped, avoiding eye contact whenever possible. Every gesture was precise, measured, as if he feared even the air around him could betray him. I knew the time had come to escalate, not recklessly, but deliberately. He had to feel the consequences of every lie, every cruel act he had hidden behind a mask for so long. I called his work, pretending to be Leah needing clarification on a project he was managing. While on the phone, I subtly referenced details from messages he had thought private. The pause on the other end of the line was palpable, the confusion, the disbelief. By the time I hung up, Darren had stormed out of the kitchen, muttering curses under his breath. His face was pale, jaw tight. What did you do?" he spat, voice trembling. I smiled softly, calm, measured. I simply reminded others that actions have consequences, Darren, and now it's your turn to face them. He froze, the weight of those words pressing down on him. For the first time, he realized that everything he had hidden, everything he had manipulated, was about to be exposed. Later that afternoon, I strategically left his phone on the counter, not unlocked, not tampered with, just visible. "You should check your messages," I said casually, almost as an afterthought. "Some things might have been noticed." His hand shook as he picked it up, eyes scanning, scanning, scanning. His face went white, then red, then pale again. I watched, silent, letting him unravel. This can't be," he muttered, fumbling with the phone. How? "You've spent years weaving a web of control, Darren, and now the web is catching up to you." By evening, his paranoia had escalated to near hysteria. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside the window, every whisper of the wind seemed to feed his fear. You've changed everything," he said, voice low and trembling. "Everything is falling apart." "Yes," I said gently. "Everything. Because you decided to hurt the people who trusted you. And now you're learning the hard way that actions have consequences." He tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. His usual arrogance, his attempts at dominance had completely dissolved. For the first time in years, he was powerless. That night, my sister came into the kitchen quietly. I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "It feels cruel." I took her hands gently. "It's not cruelty, Leah. It's justice. You've lived in fear for too long. He needs to see what fear feels like when it's on the other side." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of empowerment, of hope. He's going to break," she said softly. "Yes," I said, my voice calm and unwavering. "And when he does, it will be the first step toward your freedom." As Darren muttered to himself in the living room, clutching his phone like a lifeline, I realized something profound. The power balance had shifted completely. He no longer controlled the house. He no longer controlled my sister. And for the first time in months, my sister could breathe freely. Tomorrow, the next stage would begin. The stage where the truth became undeniable, unavoidable, and inescapable. And Darren would finally face the consequences of every secret he had tried to bury. By Wednesday morning, Darren was visibly fraying at the edges. He moved through the house with careful, shallow steps, voice barely above a whisper, hands shaking ever so slightly. Every glance in my direction carried a mix of fear and disbelief, as if he couldn't fully comprehend that the rules had changed. I had noticed the subtle tremor in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, and the way he avoided eye contact like it might betray him further. It was time. I decided the next step had to be deliberate, undeniable. I invited a neighbor, someone who had often witnessed Darren's controlling nature, over under the guise of casual tea. When he arrived, Darren's posture stiffened, shoulders rigid, his jaw tightened. His fingers drummed nervously on the counter. I smiled warmly at the neighbor and motioned for Darren to serve the tea. Every movement he made was clumsy, jerky, like a man unaccustomed to scrutiny. The neighbor's eyes flicked to him, eyebrows raised. "Everything okay?" she asked casually. Darren froze, caught between fear and pride. "Yes, everything's fine," he said, voice tense. I let a soft, calm laugh escape my lips. "Yes, Darren," I said gently, "everything is fine. But sometimes the truth has a way of coming out, even when you least expect it." Later that afternoon, I subtly brought up an event Darren had tried to cover up. The messages, the secret meetings, the lies he thought had gone unnoticed. I watched his face pale, the muscles in his jaw twitch. "Leah, what are you doing?" he asked, voice trembling. "Showing you," I said softly, "that the web of control you've spun is not invisible. And now it's unraveling." He tried to argue, to deflect, to dominate the conversation, but I remained calm, steady, unyielding. "You can't lie your way out of this. You can't intimidate us, and you certainly can't scare us anymore. Not me, not Leah." His face contorted with frustration, a flash of anger that quickly dissolved into fear. That night, my sister whispered to me as we prepared dinner together, "Do you think he'll ever admit it, the truth?" I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Maybe," I said slowly. "But even if he doesn't, the important thing is that he can't hurt you anymore. He's learning that every action has consequences, and that's a lesson he needed." Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred the pot. I can finally feel safe," she whispered. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "And that safety, that's yours to keep. No one can take it from you. Not ever again." By midnight, Darren was pacing the living room like a caged animal. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside, every whisper of the wind seemed to amplify his paranoia. And I watched from the kitchen, calm, patient, knowing that the tipping point had arrived. He was no longer in control. He had lost the narrative. He had lost the power. And when the truth finally came crashing down, there would be no escape. Tomorrow, we would force him to confront the reality of his actions, and there would be no denying it, no deflecting it, and no lying his way out. This was the moment everything shifted, and Darren would never be the same again.
By Thursday morning, Darren was visibly unraveling. He moved through the house with cautious, almost furtive steps, voice low and hands twitching involuntarily. The tension in the air was thick, heavy, like the house itself had absorbed the storm of his fear. I knew it was time for the confrontation, the moment when words would carry the weight of all the months of deception, manipulation, and abuse he had hidden. I called him into the living room. He walked in slowly, shoulders tense, eyes darting around as if searching for a hidden trap. "Sit down," I said calmly. My voice was soft, intimate, but carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He hesitated, then obeyed as if fearing the consequences of resistance. I began by speaking slowly, deliberately. Darren, for months, you've controlled, manipulated, and lied. You've hidden things from Leah, things that would have destroyed her confidence, her trust, her very sense of safety. His hands clenched into fists. I didn't mean. I held up a hand to stop him. No excuses, not now. You made your choices. You created a world where fear lived in every corner of this house. And now, it's time to face that truth. His eyes darted nervously, searching mine for any softness, any sign of weakness. There was none. I placed my phone on the coffee table, screen glowing with messages he thought were private. I want you to read this, I said quietly. Every word, every lie, every betrayal. His hands trembled as he picked it up. He scanned the messages, disbelief etched into every line of his face. His lips parted, words caught somewhere between anger, fear, and shame. I, stammered he, voice breaking. You can't take it back, I said softly. You can't erase the fear you've caused, the control you've exerted. All you can do now is face it. Tears welled in my sister's eyes as she stepped into the room, standing beside me. Darren, this is the truth, she said quietly. Everything you've tried to hide, it's here, and you need to own it.
He looked from me to her, then back at the phone, and finally slumped into the couch, defeated. The arrogance, the defiance, it was gone. I didn't mean for it to go that far, he whispered. I don't care what you meant, I said softly. I care about what you did. For the first time, he saw the depth of the damage, not as rumors or accusations, but as reality, undeniable and unflinching. Hours passed in silence. Darren sat on the couch, head in his hands, muttering under his breath. My sister and I stood together, calm, resolute, watching the man who had terrorized her for months finally understand that the tables had turned. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't cruelty. It was justice, a quiet, inevitable reckoning that came not with shouting, but with undeniable truth. By nightfall, Darren no longer spoke. He had nothing left to argue, nothing left to hide. And in that silence, my sister exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time in months, she felt free. Tomorrow, the consequences would ripple beyond the walls of our home. Darren's actions could no longer be contained, and the world would see the man behind the mask, the one who had tried to break her, but was now broken himself.
By Friday morning, Darren had become unrecognizable, not just to me and my sister, but to himself. He moved through the house like a man under siege, hands trembling, eyes constantly scanning for threats that weren't there. Every small noise made him jump. Every glance seemed like an accusation. It was time for the consequences to reach beyond our walls. I sent an email to a few of Darren's close colleagues, carefully composed, factual, and neutral in tone. I didn't embellish, I didn't exaggerate, I simply presented the proof he could no longer hide, the messages, the meetings, the lies. Within hours, the ripple began. His phone rang constantly, messages flooded in, emails marked urgent, and each notification drove him further into panic. By midday, Darren's office had reached out, requesting a meeting. His colleagues had seen the messages, had pieced together the story, and now he could no longer pretend. When he confronted me later that afternoon, voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "What have you done?" I met his gaze calmly. I showed the truth. That's all. You've been living in fear for months. Now it's time to live with consequences. He sank into the couch, silent, pale, utterly powerless. The evening brought the inevitable, a call from his mother. "Darren, we've heard. Is it true?" she asked, voice tight, disbelief mingled with anger. His response was a strangled whisper, no words coming out fully. He realized, finally, that his carefully constructed world of lies had collapsed. Meanwhile, my sister and I sat together in the quiet living room. She took my hand, eyes shining with gratitude and relief. She said, I can finally breathe," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly, "and soon the rest of the world will understand too. It's not about revenge. It's about truth and your safety and reclaiming the life that's yours." For the first time in months, we could sit without fear. The tension that had gripped the house like a vice was finally easing. By nightfall, Darren was a shell of the man he had once been, humiliated, exposed, and forced to face the reality of every cruel action he had hidden. And my sister? She was free. The next stage would be the final step, rebuilding, healing, and ensuring that the life she deserved would no longer be threatened by fear, lies, or abuse.
Saturday morning arrived quietly, almost peacefully. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. Instead, it carried a fragile sense of calm, one my sister and I had both longed for, but hardly dared to imagine. We moved slowly through the rooms, tidying, organizing, and breathing in the normalcy that had been stolen from us. Each small task, folding laundry, making breakfast, watering the plants, felt like a reclamation of the life that Darren had tried to suffocate. My sister sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, eyes soft but resolute. "I don't even recognize this feeling," she admitted. "I feel safe. I feel strong." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "You are strong, and this safety, it's yours. No one can take it from you now. Not him, not anyone." She smiled faintly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I thought I'd never get here." "You did," I said gently. "You just needed someone to help show you the way. And now, you're free to move forward." Over the next few days, we focused on restoring not just the home, but the sense of trust, dignity, and autonomy that Darren's manipulation had destroyed. We created routines that felt normal again, and slowly, cautiously, my sister began to reclaim the parts of her life Darren had tried to control. She went back to her work, laughing again at small things she hadn't felt safe laughing at before. She met friends for coffee without anxiety twisting her stomach. Even the way she moved through the house, confident, unguarded, unafraid, felt like a quiet victory. Darren, meanwhile, remained in the house, silent and withdrawn. The once boastful man who had ruled with fear was reduced to someone who barely spoke above a whisper. His humiliation and exposure had stripped him of his false authority. I never gloated. I simply observed. Justice had been served in the quietest, most powerful way. Truth revealed, lies exposed, and control dismantled. One evening, my sister turned to me as we sat together in the living room, soft lamplight glowing around us. "Do you think I can ever trust someone again?" I shook my head gently. "You don't need to trust everyone, but you can trust yourself. That trust is what matters. And remember, Leah, anyone who doesn't respect your boundaries isn't worth your time or energy. You've survived this. You'll survive anything. Her eyes glistened, but this time with hope. I I really believe that now. By the end of the week, the house felt alive again, not with fear, but with life. Laughter returned in small doses, quiet smiles replaced tension, and even the air seemed lighter. My sister and I had not just survived Darren's manipulation, we had reclaimed our world, our safety, and our dignity. It was healing in its purest form, slow, deliberate, and undeniable. And in that quiet reclamation, I realized something profound. Freedom wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about seeing Darren fall. Freedom was about restoring life, love, and trust where cruelty had tried to take it away.
By Sunday, the house was fully transformed, not just physically, but emotionally. The tension that had once clung to every corner had dissolved, leaving a quiet, almost sacred space. My sister moved through it with a newfound grace, no longer haunted by shadows or whispers, no longer flinching at imagined threats. I watched her in the morning light, folding laundry with steady hands, humming softly. She looked up and caught my gaze, smiling faintly. "Do you ever regret what we did?" she asked, voice soft, almost hesitant. I shook my head. No, we didn't hurt him out of spite. We acted to protect you, to restore your life. And in doing that, we showed him, well, the consequences of his cruelty. Her eyes softened. I never thought I'd see the day when I could just breathe again. The next few days were spent quietly, without fanfare, rebuilding her confidence in small, deliberate ways. She went to the store alone, came home with groceries and a smile. She answered her phone without anxiety curling in her chest. She even laughed at a joke her friends sent her, a small, beautiful victory. Every day, the house became less a reminder of fear and more of a sanctuary. Darren remained in the house a silent witness to the life he had tried to control but could no longer dominate. I made sure we never gloatingly flaunted his downfall. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about exposure. The truth had set us free, and that truth was quiet, resolute, and undeniable. One evening, my sister turned to me while we were sipping tea on the porch. The sun dipped low, painting the sky gold. "Do you think he'll ever change?" she asked. I shook my head gently. Maybe not, but that's not your problem anymore. You've survived. You've reclaimed your life. You don't need him to change. You just need to keep moving forward. Her eyes glistened with gratitude and relief. I really believe that now. The house began to feel lighter, warmer. The lingering fear had vanished, replaced with something that felt like hope. And with that hope, my sister began to envision a life that didn't revolve around manipulation, control, or abuse. She started small, reconnecting with friends, laughing without fear, standing taller. Then slightly bigger steps, taking back finances, scheduling appointments she had once avoided, reclaiming every small decision Darren had tried to dominate. Every step she took was a quiet triumph. Every choice was a reminder of her strength. One night, as we closed the doors and turned off the lights, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure, not just for her, but for both of us. The storm had passed, the truth had won, and in the silence that followed, I realized that the most powerful form of justice isn't vengeance. It's reclaiming your life, one calm, deliberate step at a time. By Monday, the air in the house had changed completely.
no longer heavy with fear. It carried a subtle, calm energy, like the earth after a storm. My sister moved through the rooms with quiet confidence, her steps measured, her posture upright. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. Darren, meanwhile, remained withdrawn, a shadow in his own home. The once commanding presence had shrunk to a man who barely spoke above a whisper, whose eyes avoided ours at every turn. He had learned, finally, that control is fleeting when it is built on lies and cruelty. That afternoon, we made the deliberate decision to expose Darren fully, to ensure that the consequences of his actions were visible to anyone who might be affected. I contacted a few close friends of my sister, people who had noticed her distress over the months, people who had once offered gentle advice but were brushed aside. We shared the facts calmly, deliberately, with no embellishment. Each revelation hit its mark, quietly but powerfully. The ripple effect was immediate. Friends reached out, colleagues expressed concern, and even extended family members began asking questions they had been too afraid to voice before. Darren, aware of the growing scrutiny, moved like a man on edge. His phone never left his hand. Every glance he cast around the house was paranoid. Every step he took was measured and tense. You're going too far," he muttered one evening, voice low and trembling. "You don't have to do this." I met his gaze calmly. "Darren, this isn't about revenge. It's about truth, about accountability. You've spent years hiding behind lies, hurting Leah, controlling her life. This is simply the consequence of those actions." He flinched, shoulders stiff, jaw tight. He had no words left, only the weight of what had been revealed pressing down on him. By the end of the week, Darren's life outside the house began to unravel in quiet, undeniable ways. His colleagues had heard, his reputation was tarnished, and every carefully built lie he had relied upon was now exposed. Inside the house, my sister was a picture of calm determination. She moved freely, laughed without hesitation, and spoke her mind with quiet authority. The once constant tremor of fear in her voice had vanished completely. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, the sun dipping low behind the trees, my sister whispered, "I can't believe how different life feels now. I feel free, truly free." I reached across, squeezing her hand. "You are free, and this freedom, no one can take it from you. You face the storm and come out the other side. That's real strength." Her eyes glistened, reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. "I never thought I'd feel this light, like a weight has been lifted from me forever." That night, as Darren moved silently through the house, he realized something he had never truly understood, that power built on fear, manipulation, and lies is fragile. And when the truth comes, no amount of intimidation or control can hold it back. For my sister and for me, it was the final lesson. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, patient, and inevitable. And for the first time, I felt a deep, serene satisfaction. Not of vengeance, but of truth finally prevailing.
By the following week, the house felt like a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. Every corner, every wall seemed lighter, infused with a sense of calm that had been missing for far too long. My sister moved freely, her laughter returning in quiet bursts, no longer punctuated by anxiety or fear. We focused on routines, small grounding rituals that reaffirmed control over our lives. Morning coffee at the kitchen table, soft music in the background, plants tended with care. Life had begun to feel ordinary again, And that ordinariness was beautiful in its own quiet way. Darren lingered in the house, silent and withdrawn. He avoided conversation, avoided eye contact, and carried an air of resignation that was unfamiliar to him. The man who had once ruled through fear now existed in a state of quiet observation, watching, waiting, powerless. "Do you think he'll ever change?" my sister asked one morning as we sorted laundry together. I shook my head. Maybe, maybe not. But it doesn't matter anymore. He's no longer in control. That's what counts. She nodded, eyes soft but steady. I think I can finally live for myself now. We began reconnecting with friends and family who had been concerned for months. My sister's smile returned naturally, her voice unguarded, and for the first time she laughed without hesitation. Even the neighbors noticed the change. Quiet compliments, warm greetings, and gentle check-ins became part of our days, subtle reminders that the world outside was safe and even welcoming. One afternoon, while organizing some paperwork in the office, my sister looked at me and said, "I never realized how much of my life I had given away to fear, to him." "You didn't give it away," I said gently. "You simply didn't know it was yours to reclaim, and now you do." Her smile was quiet but profound. "I feel whole again, like I can finally breathe." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "And that's all that matters. You've reclaimed yourself. Nothing else can take that from you." By the end of the week, Darren had retreated into a state of quiet isolation, fully aware that the world no longer bowed to his control. He had lost the facade, the power, and the fear he once commanded. The consequences of his actions were clear, undeniable, and inescapable. Meanwhile, my sister thrived. Every small decision, every choice she made independently reinforced the strength she had built quietly, patiently over the weeks of reckoning. The final lesson had crystallized. Life could be rebuilt, trust could be restored, and freedom could be claimed even after months of fear and manipulation. And in the quiet evenings, as the house settled into calm, I realized that the hardest battles, those fought within the home, within the soul, could also become the most empowering victories.
By the following week, the house had transformed completely, not just in appearance, but in spirit. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden, catching on surfaces that had long been dull with tension. The air no longer felt heavy with fear. It felt alive with possibility. My sister moved through the rooms with confidence, her posture upright, her head held high. There was no flinching, no hesitation, just quiet strength, a testament to the weeks we had endured and the courage she had summoned. She came to me one evening as we sat on the porch, a gentle breeze brushing her hair back from her face. "I feel like myself again," she said softly, voice steady but tinged with awe. You are yourself," I replied. "The person he tried to break is still here, stronger than ever. You just had to see it for yourself." Her eyes glistened, a mix of relief and newfound determination. I never imagined freedom could feel like this, like a slow, steady breath after holding it in for years. We spent the following days rebuilding routines and reclaiming the little joys of everyday life. Morning coffee without fear, walks outside without anxiety, calls with friends without hesitation. Each small victory reinforced the message life was no longer dictated by control or fear. Even Darren's presence became negligible. He existed in the house, yes, but he no longer had influence. His attempts at intimidation, his subtle manipulations, they had all been stripped away by truth, exposure, and unwavering resolve. One afternoon, my sister laughed for the first time in months, truly laughed, and it echoed through the house like a release of all the tension we had carried. I realized then that this was the real victory, not the chaos we had unleashed, not the fear we had instilled in Darren, but the restoration of life itself. "Do you think he'll ever understand what he lost?" she asked quietly as we sipped tea in the kitchen. I shook my head gently. Maybe, maybe not. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand what you've gained: freedom, safety, and the knowledge that no one can take that away from you again. The house settled into a rhythm of calm, warm light spilling through the windows, laughter returning in quiet moments, and the quiet, unwavering sense of justice that had taken root over the past weeks. For my sister, this was a beginning, not a perfect life, not an easy life, but a life fully reclaimed from fear, manipulation, and lies. For me, it was a moment of quiet reflection, the reminder that sometimes the most profound victories are the ones that restore what was nearly lost, rather than destroy what has already fallen. We had faced cruelty, fear, and deceit. We had exposed the truth. We had reclaimed our lives, and in the quiet aftermath, there was peace, strength, and hope. As I sit here, watching the evening light fade through the window, I can't help but reflect on everything that happened: the fear, the pain, the lies, and finally, the quiet reclamation of life. Life has a way of testing us, of showing us the edges of our strength, and sometimes it takes the courage to stand up, to speak truth, and to act deliberately to reclaim the life that was nearly stolen from us. My sister and I learned that freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it comes in the form of subtle actions, careful steps, and unwavering courage. We learn that justice doesn't always mean revenge. It doesn't have to be dramatic or public. True justice is truth revealed, boundaries respected, and life reclaimed. And most importantly, we learn that even after months or years of fear and control, it's possible to heal, to find peace, and to rebuild. Strength grows in the quiet moments of courage, not in the chaos of anger. So, I ask you, dear listener, if you were in our place, would you have found the courage to act? Would you have reclaimed the life that fear tried to steal? Take a moment to think about it. Your strength may surprise you. And remember, no one, not cruelty, not lies, not fear, can take from you what is truly yours if you choose to reclaim it. If our story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or strength, share it. Talk about it. Let others know they are not alone, because sometimes the quietest victories inspire the loudest change.